All right. I've got Zoom working. I've got this open. So we're going to do the PowerPoint on files and talk about that. In this particular unit, you are going to have to download quite a few files to use. And they're really simple files, so if you didn't download them, you probably could create your own, but you might as well use mine since I already created them. So they should be in here. There's some examples in a Word document I did too. Oh, I have those hidden. I'll go get those unhidden for you. The little eyeball tells me that they're hidden. But we're going to, golf scores is down here. Okay. We're going to use grades and golf scores. I'm gonna be honest with you. I knew nothing about golf until somebody gave me this assignment to use, and I learned about par and birdies. And you don't have to know anything about golf to make this work. Just read the directions. There is a departmental quiz. Now, it's not actually due until the end of the semester. It is part of your participation grade, because if I don't make it part of your participation grade, you don't do it. And then I tried doing it as extra credit, and then the majority of class didn't do it. So it is actually a grade. It will go into the grade book, but it's a quiz where I have to turn into the school itself, not just my department, because y'all, this is a gen ed class, saying that we are covering the topics that are on the syllabus. Please take it. There's one wonky question that I'll go back and hand grade because I don't agree with the answer, but it has to do with parameter lists. So, but I'll hand grade that one. But it's only 9 or 10 questions. It's pretty general information about the class and what we did. And it works. So you want to take it between now and final exam. So I'm going to push that every class until then, probably, just because we had such a low participation in it last year. And I had to sit in a meeting about that. So let's participate. Online too, everybody participate in the departmental quiz. All I can do is help you grade, right? You needed some more participation, especially those of you who forgot to do your lab. Your Zybook content and didn't turn it in. Speaking of that, there's been a huge drop off of people actually doing the book reading. Y'all either do all of it or none of it. There's not a happy medium in there, which is fine. So let's get this PowerPoint down. It's going to be a short lab when our short presentation when there's only 14 PowerPoint slides, right? All right, so ignore those dates because they're from a previous class. So last time we talked about strings and lists. We used indexes to access different parts of our strings and lists, right? Okay. Gotta be one of those mornings. We sliced up our string. We only took parts of it, or we only took parts of our list and did things with it, right? And we iterated through collections. Iterated is a fancy word for we went through it one step at a time in one direction or the other. We used our loops. So files allow us to have persistent storage. So far, everything we've been doing with our Python code only exists while it's running, right? And once you stop running it, the data's gone. You didn't save the pictures you edited in project 2. You didn't get to go look at them again later. Well, after we do this, if you wanted to, you could go back and edit Project 2 and write out those new pictures if you really wanted to. Most people don't, but if you wanted to, you should have that knowledge when we're done here. So it gives us the ability to save something. And I will never say it's permanent storage because every storage structure I have ever used has failed on me at some point in time in my life. Even the cloud has failed me on a time or two because it won't sync when I need it to. So I'm of the generation where we used floppy disk, and I could break a floppy disk faster than anybody when I was getting my degree in computer science. I used to make 3, sometimes 4 copies of every assignment because I would break floppy disks, or I'd get them too close to a magnet and they would erase. Or they would just corrupt the data. I don't know. They just hated me. I had a professor one time tell me it was my magnetic personality. He thought he was funny. I didn't, so it was okay. There are different types of files. We have been using image files. In Project 2, we used image files. There's application-specific files. So your Word docs, your Google products all have different extensions. If you ever save a Word document, it's DOC or DOCX. PowerPoint is PPT. So whenever you see that dot and the 3 letters, that's generally telling your computer what type of file you're opening. So it knows which program to associate it with. This was more obvious back in the day when you actually had to save things with the proper formats and stuff. Now Windows or your Mac OS automatically does most of that for you. But it's a good way to sort. If you're looking for a PowerPoint and you're on your personal computer and you have hundreds of files, you can just sort it by PPT, and then it pulls all PowerPoint files up to the top. Because I'm notoriously bad for forgetting when I name something. If I go back looking for a PowerPoint for a class that I haven't taught in a couple of semesters, I don't always remember what I named that PowerPoint. I'm trying to get better about putting everything in their own separate folders. But let's face it, we get in a hurry sometimes. And programs are really bad about auto-saving into places that you don't particularly want them. I have more stuff in my documents folder than I ever really intended to be there without proper labeling. Text files are usually indicated with TXT. They're what you use in Notepad. They're your simplest format. They don't have a lot of pretty bells and whistles to go with them. They're generally just straight text. We're going to be working with text files because they're the easiest to work with. And you have to, for Python, you won't have to be pulling out formatting and stuff. We're just going to go straight text files. We're going to be using files that use CSV formatting, which is comma separated values. So it lets you store numbers in text. It's very much plain text. You can actually take Excel spreadsheets and save them as CSV files. So if you needed to import them into another program, you have them in a very simple format. What they do is each row is a line in the file, and the columns are divided up with commas. You see this a lot with databases. Each row is a record, and that record is divided up in its most simplistic form with commas, denoting when it changes. There are other ways to do this. There's other file formats. We're not going to touch on them in this class. You'll learn more about them in other classes. Like I said, typically comma separated file formats are saved as TXT files or CSV files. So this is a really short example of what a text file this comma separated might look like. And based on being in the United States, I can look at that and go, the first one looks like a date format. The second one is just random numbers with no indication. I know the name of the file is steps, but I don't know if they did 9,000 steps or 574 steps. So this is where your top row or your title row comes into play a lot of times. Very simple files may not save that information for you, so you would have to know it. We also need to talk a little bit about file paths. So if I want to find something and I don't have the option of looking in my Windows file system and having a graphical representation of where everything is, they have file paths. And I got you around the file paths with project 2 by having you put everything in the same folder, because by default computers look for stuff in the closest location to where the file that's running is at. But this right here on this side of the screen is 2 file paths to do 2 different two different representations of file paths. They're going to the same file, but depending on your system, the slashes change. I'm not familiar at all with how Macs work. I'm just going to be straight up with you. I don't use a Mac. I don't see them frequently enough to use them, but it's similar. In the case of your desktop PC, if it's not a Mac, you usually have a C drive, which is your primary hard drive, and then files on it. Every time you need to change a file from one folder to another, you generally list the folder / the next step. So each step in your file structure is separated by a backslash on a PC. So your documents folder could have, I guess, technically it could have infinite number of folders in it, depending on how much storage you have. But you could have a one-to-many relationship there. You could create a lot of folders. You could have a folder for your finance class. You could have a folder for your calc class. You could have a folder for pictures. So just remember that if you are not storing or downloading these files that I gave you into the same folder, can't store them in the same folder, you have to, when you open them, give the complete file path, including what folder they're in and how to get to. Again, this is an intro class, so I'm just going to tell you that this stuff exists, talk you through it a little bit if you want me to, but ultimately I would tell you probably are the easiest solution for you is to make sure you save everything in the same folder where you don't have to go looking for it. So an absolute path gives you exact locations. You can have paths that are not complete, and there's some symbols that say that indicate that you already know you're so far into the path, or you're already in, let's say you're already in a documents folder, you can use some symbols to do that. Again, the easiest thing you could do is store everything locally. Relative paths use dots and slashes. The dot, one dot in front of it means go up one folder level, 2 dots means go up 2 folder levels or more. So if you're using a single dot, you're probably in the same folder. They're all in the same folder. If you use 2, you can go back 1 folder. Can you go back more than 1 folder using the dots? No. Go back 1 folder, shortcuts there. Okay. Y'all out looking at me like I'm talking about stuff you already know. Huh? I sound like the adult in Charlie Brown. Okay. They go, whoa, 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 whoa. You need to go watch Charlie Brown. Oh man, I feel really old now. Okay, so Python specific. We're gonna have to open a file before we can use it. So there's an open command. The open command takes the name of the file, and then it takes another parameter. The R stands for read. Now, if all we're going to do is read the data in, perfect. If we need to change the data, then we would put RW in there because we want to read write. In this case, and for all of my assignments, we're only reading the original file. We will write to a new file because we don't want to override our original data. Right? So if you have it in the same folder, you don't need anything but the file name. If you have it 1 folder up, you have to put / in front of it. Or if you have it in some weird, wild place, you have to put the absolute path name to it. Here's the problem with absolute path names. Your absolute path and my absolute path will not be the same because my hard drive will have different folder structure than your hard drive. So if you use an absolute path or even a relative path that has multiple steps in it, your stuff will not open on my computer because I won't have the same folders. And then I'll look at it and go, oh, I saved it in a different place, and then I'll have to go looking for it, or I'll change your path names to my path name. So ideally, you're going to put all this in the same folder where it all works when I run it and grade it. It makes your life easier, makes my life easier. And when I'm happy, when I'm grading, it's so much better for everybody. Not really. I'm trying to be as fair as possible, but let's make all our lives. Anytime you open a file, you need to close a file. So if you've got a function that opens and reads a file, the last line of that function should be close the file. Now, what happens if you don't close the file? Not a lot for us because this is relatively small, but if you were working with huge databases and you opened a bunch of files, you would eventually hinder your performance because it would have a bunch of memory used up. Am I going to take off if you forget to close a file? Yes, because you need to learn now, if you open it, to close it. And this will help you out when you get to other classes and they're like, why didn't you close this file? If we start practicing that now, you'll have good habits and we won't have to retrain bad habits. Kind of like raising children. We start off with good habits, we don't have to break them when they get older. Which somebody told me that when my oldest was born. It's rotten. So close is really easy. It's whatever variable you opened the file into, .close. No parameters, very simple. Close. When you take step data here and you open the file, it reads the entire file into that variable as one long string. Right? It's just a collection of rows. So we're going to iterate through each line using a for each loop. we set up a variable called current line. We give it the collection step data. Each row ends with a return character. You don't see it when you open the file and look at it, but when it's read in, the background formatting is there, and the return character string representation is in your file. So when we start manipulating the data, after you've read it into Python, you'll have to strip that off before you print it out if you're using the last element on a row. You also helps you know when you reach the end of the line. So the for each loop will go through and it'll read each line until it hits that return character and put it in a separate variable. Now you can do something with it. In this case, we're just printing the current line. But if we wanted the current line, but we only wanted one piece of data, this loop also would work for that. We would just write more code and say, give me element 1, put it in a temporary variable, do whatever you need to do with it, and go. So you'll notice throughout this, there's some red commands underlined. Hopefully all my links are still working, but if you click on these, they should take you to the string methods and you can go look at what you can do with them. They're working here. I assume they will work at your house. If not, you can go to the API, look up string, and they'll be there. It just won't be as quick. So if I need to split a string, I would use the split function instead of writing a loop to try to do it. You could do it manually, but the split will let you split on a particular character. In this case, everything is comma separated. So you could split a string up by everywhere it says a comma. So if you have a string with AB 24.2 and dog in it, and they're all comma separated fields, I could use values and the split function, and it would create a list with each of those elements as a different thing. Otherwise, it's a string. So it's read in as a string, but we can do more with the data if we make it a list. So you have to convert your data before you can do anything with it. You all are looking at me like, yes, no? Okay. So initially it's a string. We're going to split the string and create a list. Now the list is going to be easier for us to work with 1 or 2 elements individually. Okay. Thumbs up, you got me. Thumbs down, you want me to keep talking? Okay, good. All right. So basically, we're going to use a lot of loops to play with data. I think so. You may all hate me with this. So if we split it and put it into a list, I can now just print all the items in column 1. And just like everything else, this indexes starting at 0. So the first column you see is actually index 0. Second one is 1. Third one is 2, so on. So don't forget that we start counting at 0 and that 0 exists. So if I wanted, from the example before where I had a date and 2 arbitrary numbers about steps, if I wanted the date, I would put index 0. If I wanted the number of total steps for the day, which is what I assumed the middle number was, I would put that in as 1. And then the last number down there is maybe how many steps you needed to reach your target. I don't know what the lower number. I'm making this up off the top of my head because I didn't have a key to what the column. And look, the very last thing I'm gonna do when I'm finished printing off that column is close my file. So what your format's gonna look like in here is you're gonna have a function that opens the file, calls all the things we need to do to manipulate it, do all the work, and at the end of that function, it's gonna close it. Now, will you have other functions in your program? Absolutely, because those will be helper functions that'll actually do the work. Could we do this in May? Yes. Will we? Depends on the assignment how it's written. So you could use May to open your file, calls function to go manipulate it, and then when it's returned everything back to main, close the file. But somewhere in your code, you're going to close that file. You can build a list that contains just one step in that file. So if I only needed the dates that you walked and not how many steps you walked, I could open that file, read the data in, separate it out, and then take just column 0 and write that into another list. And now I just have that data in a separate list to manipulate and do stuff with, but I haven't lost the integrity of my original file because I read it in and put it into a new list to do stuff with. A better example probably would be if you had a grade book, you had a student name, a grade, student ID number, right? I just need the class average, let's say. I don't need the student's name, I don't need their student ID number because I want anonymous data. So I could go in, open that file, read column 1, which is the grade, into a new list or a new collection. And then from that collection, I can start doing things like finding the minimum grade, the maximum grade, or the average grade. And I haven't changed the integrity of the original data. The key to this is remembering if you're going to do something with the last column, that you may have to strip the /n off of it because it's automatically added when we read it in. So when you start printing it off or you try to do math with it, it's going to say, oh, you can't do that because it's not a number. That means that you forgot to take the /n off. You can use any of the string functions to get rid of that in several different ways. And that's all I have as far as new content. Are we all like on the same page now that we're going to be doing lists? Does that make sense? All right, I'm going to cut you guys loose at this point. We are going to do lab 8 in class on Wednesday. If you have questions about assignment 7 and want to stick around, I will stay here for the next 30 minutes or so and answer questions. I am going to move the due date for assignment 7 to Friday because I wasn't here this past Friday to give you some more time to ask me questions. I wasn't counting on my computer deciding that it didn't like me while I was gone, so I couldn't answer emails effectively. I can answer emails on my phone, but I can't read your code on my phone. So if it's a code specific question, I couldn't answer it. I do have a student that is currently out of the country, and I'm like, I sent her an email like, I'll look at it Monday and I'll send you some more information then. But if you are done with me, I'll see you on Wednesday. If you have questions, stick around. Because you remember things. If I don't put the announcement on court stand about changing the due date, by this afternoon email. All right.